a legacy for my family, and now that same family was trying to kill me to steal it. But thanks to the protective innocence of an 8-year-old boy and the meticulous planning of the last few hours, I had a chance of survival that my potential killers were completely unaware of. The final battle was about to begin. At 8 o'clock sharp at night, Robert's black Mercedes stopped in front of my mansion with a punctuality that I found sinister. From the window of my study, I watched them descend from the vehicle with calculatedly normal movements, but I could detect the artificial tension in their gestures. Pamela wore an elegant dress completely inappropriate for a home dinner, and Robert wore his best suit as if they were attending a special celebration. Before opening the door, I verified one last time that my mobile phone was connected to the hidden camera system. Every word, every movement of that night would be recorded in high definition, creating a digital file that could save my life or become posthumous evidence of my murder. "Dad, you look so elegant tonight," exclaimed Robert, with a dazzling smile that did not reach his eyes. His hug was longer than usual, and I could feel how his hands discreetly patted my torso, perhaps verifying if I was wearing any recording device. "Joseph, we are so excited to have you at home tonight," added Pamela, kissing my cheeks with a theatrical effusiveness. "I have prepared everything exactly as you like. Roast beef with aromatic herbs, red wine from your favorite cellar, and those almond desserts you enjoy so much." During the drive to their house, I maintained an apparently normal conversation while meticulously observing every detail of their behaviors. Robert drove with slightly trembling hands, and Pamela did not stop talking about trivialities, a nervousness that contrasted dramatically with the calculating confidence they had demonstrated in previous weeks. Upon arriving at their residence, I noticed immediately that they had made special preparations. The curtains were completely closed, eliminating any visibility from the outside. The garden lights were off, creating an environment of total isolation that would facilitate clandestine activities without risk of accidental witnesses. "Where is Arthur?" I asked, puzzled by the absence of my grandson, who always received me with enthusiasm during my visits. "Oh, we decided it would be better for him to spend the night at his cousin Daniel's house," replied Pamela too quickly. "We wanted to have an intimate evening of adults to talk about important topics with you." This explanation confirmed my worst suspicions. They had deliberately removed the only innocent witness who could complicate the execution of their homicidal plan. Arthur's absence also meant there would be no childish interruptions that could interfere with the meticulous timeline of my poisoning. The dinner began with a disturbing normality. Pamela had indeed prepared a splendid banquet, perfectly seasoned steak, roasted vegetables, artisanal bread, and a selection of wines that demonstrated detailed knowledge of my culinary preferences, but every bite I took to my mouth represented a potential risk of death. During the first course, I maintained light conversations about the company, feigning total ignorance about their investigations and preparations. I observed carefully how Pamela served my food, noticing that she used specific plates and cutlery that she had previously separated from the rest of the family tableware. "Dad, we have been reflecting a lot on your future," began Robert when we reached the main course. "Your health, your well-being, the administration of everything you have built during so many years of sacrifice. It is natural that at your age you begin to consider transitions," added Pamela, filling my wine glass with exaggerated attention. "After all, you have worked tirelessly for decades. You deserve to rest and enjoy the fruits of your effort." Their words floated loaded with double meaning. When they spoke of transitions, they referred to my imminent death. When they mentioned rest, they alluded to the eternal rest they planned to provide me that same night. "I appreciate your concern, but I feel completely vital and capable of continuing to direct the company for many more years," I replied, observing how they exchanged looks of frustration at my resistance to their implied suggestions. The critical moment arrived during dessert. Pamela disappeared toward the kitchen, supposedly to prepare coffee and the promised almond sweets. From my position in the dining room, I could hear metallic sounds and the clinking of jars noises that matched perfectly with the preparation of additional substances for my final consumption. When she returned, she carried an elegant tray with steaming coffee served in individual cups and beautifully presented desserts. But the most significant thing was her expression, a mixture of anticipatory excitement and nervousness, revealing that the climax of their plan had arrived. "This coffee is special, Joseph, an exclusive blend that I imported especially for you," she explained to me, placing a specific cup directly in front of me. "And the desserts carry a secret artisanal touch that I found in an organic market." I feigned gratitude while evaluating the situation. I knew with certainty that both the coffee and the desserts contained the lethal substances they had been preparing for weeks, but I needed to obtain an explicit verbal confession that complemented all the gathered circumstantial evidence. "Before enjoying this magnificent coffee, I would like to make a toast," I announced, raising my wine glass. "To family, to loyalty, and to the honesty that must characterize our most intimate relationships." Robert and Pamela raised their glasses mechanically, but I could see how the word honesty caused them visible discomfort. It was the perfect moment to force a revelation. "In fact," I continued with apparent casualness, "I've been thinking recently about the importance of knowing the true intentions of the people we love most. Does absolute transparency between relatives not seem fundamental to you?" Pamela began to shift nervously in her chair. "Of course, Joseph. Honesty is very important." "Excellent. Then perhaps you can explain to me why you have been visiting pharmacies to buy toxic substances, meeting with corrupt pharmacists, and negotiating the sale of my company before my death." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert and Pamela's glasses froze halfway to their lips, and their faces transformed from friendly masks into expressions of pure terror. "What are you talking about, Dad?" murmured Robert, but his voice trembled visibly. "I'm speaking of concentrated garlic extracts, eucalyptus oils, potassium supplements, and ethyl alcohol." I listed meticulously. "I'm speaking of flights to the Bahamas, scheduled for next week. I am speaking of the detailed plans you have to murder me tonight and steal $847 million. Pamela dropped her glass, which shattered against the floor in an explosion of crystal and red wine spread like blood over the white tiles. "We do not know what you are talking about," she whispered, but her eyes betrayed total panic. "No?" I smiled coldly. "Then explain to me exactly what my coffee and my desserts contain right now." The panic on Robert and Pamela's faces quickly transformed into desperation when they understood that their meticulously crafted plan had been discovered. But what they did not expect was my next move. "Before you answer," I continued with calculated calm, "I must inform you that every word of this conversation is being recorded in high definition, and that the state police has orders to intervene in any suspicious medical emergency that may occur in this house tonight." The color completely disappeared from Pamela's face. Robert, in an act of desperation, lunged toward my coffee cup to prevent the physical evidence from being analyzed later. "Do not touch that!" shouted Pamela, but it was already too late. Robert's impulsive reaction had unequivocally confirmed that the coffee contained lethal substances. At that precise moment, the doorbell rang with official insistence. Pamela ran toward the window and collapsed against the wall upon seeing two police vehicles parked in front of her residence. "Good evening. I am Detective Charles Mason of the State Police," announced an authoritative voice from outside. "We have a judicial warrant to perform a preventive inspection related to documented threats against the life of Mr. Joseph Miller." Robert tried to head toward the back door of the house, but stopped abruptly when he heard additional voices coming from the back garden. The police operation had completely surrounded the property, eliminating any possibility of escape. Open the door immediately, or we will proceed to force entry, continued Detective Mason. Pamela walked like a zombie toward the main entrance, followed by Robert, who kept his hands trembling, and the lost gaze of someone who had just seen his future completely crumble. When the door opened, 6 fully equipped police officers entered, led by Detective Mason, a man of approximately 45 years, with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to handling complex criminal situations. "Mr. Miller, are you in safe physical condition?" he asked me immediately while his agents dispersed strategically throughout the house. "Perfectly, Detective, but I recommend immediately analyzing the contents of this cup of coffee and these desserts before they can be altered or destroyed," I replied, pointing toward the dining room table. 2 forensic technicians who had arrived with the police team immediately approached with evidence collection equipment, hermetically sealing samples of food and drinks that would have caused my death in the following hours. Robert Miller and Pamela Sanders declared the detective solemnly, "You are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit homicide with economic motivation. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can be used against you during judicial proceedings." The reading of rights resonated in the dining room like a final sentence on their murderous ambitions. Pamela began to sob hysterically while Robert maintained an empty expression of complete defeat, but Detective Mason had more surprises prepared. "Furthermore, we have search warrants for this property and for your vehicles, based on preliminary evidence of criminal activities related to acquisition of toxic substances and planning of premeditated homicide." The next 30 minutes passed like a perfectly coordinated military operation. The agents systematically searched every corner of the house, while forensic technicians photographically documented every detail of the scene and collected samples of everything I had been destined to consume. In Robert and Pamela's master bedroom, investigators discovered a hidden safe containing additional incriminating documents, detailed maps of escape routes to the airport, confirmed reservations for flights to the Bahamas, scheduled for the next day, and, most shocking of all, death certificates, pre-filled with my name and the date of the next day. "Mr. Miller," the detective informed me, showing me the documents, "these certificates were prepared by Dr. Frank Alexander, who is already being questioned at our facilities for fraudulent issuance of official documents." The network of corruption that Robert and Pamela had built was crumbling completely under the police investigation. It was not solely a family passion crime. It was an organized criminal conspiracy involving multiple professional accomplices. In the kitchen, investigators found the original jars of toxic substances Robert had acquired at the pharmacies, along with detailed handwritten instructions on lethal dosages and administration methods that would guarantee, apparently, natural death. "Do you have anything to declare before being transferred for formal interrogation?" the detective asked my detained relatives. Pamela, between sobs, murmured, "We just wanted the money. It was not personal against you, Joseph. We just needed the money." Her partial confession was immediately recorded by the agents, but Robert maintained silence, probably following legal advice he had previously received from his corrupt lawyer. The most emotional moment arrived when the detective informed me about Arthur's situation. "Mr. Miller, the minor, is currently in protective custody of social services. Given the circumstances, it will be necessary to evaluate his family situation and determine appropriate custody arrangements." My heart broke upon understanding that Arthur, the innocent boy who had saved my life, was now effectively an orphan with parents arrested for attempted murder and a completely uncertain future. "Detective, I want to formally express my intention to request legal custody of my grandson," I declared without hesitation. "He is the only innocent relative in this whole tragedy and has the right to grow up in a safe and loving environment." When they finally transferred Robert and Pamela in separate police vehicles, handcuffed and escorted by armed agents, I understood that I had witnessed the definitive end of my family, as I had known it for decades. But I had also witnessed the triumph of justice over greed, of truth over betrayal, and of protection over vulnerability. My grandson was safe, my life had been preserved, and my assets protected from the claws of killers who shared my blood. The most important battle of my life was over, and against all odds, I had emerged victorious. The days following the arrest passed like a hurricane of legal and media activity that transformed my private life into a public spectacle of national proportions. The press had christened the case as the Grocery Empire crime, and every sordid detail of the family conspiracy became a front-page headline. The following Monday, I received a call from District Attorney Michael Torres, who had personally taken charge of the case due to its complexity and media impact. His voice transmitted the professional satisfaction of someone who had built an irrefutable criminal file. Mr. Miller, the toxicological analyses have confirmed our worst suspicions, he informed me with a grave tone. The coffee you were destined to consume contained a lethal combination of concentrated extracts that would have caused fulminant cardiac arrest in approximately 2 hours. The dosage was so precise that it would have been practically impossible to detect homicide during a routine autopsy. The scientific precision of the poison gave me retrospective chills. Robert and Pamela had left nothing to chance. They had planned my murder with the meticulousness of surgeons specialized in death. "What has happened during the interrogations?" I asked, although I feared knowing the details of how my own relatives had internally rationalized the decision to murder me. "The confessions have been extraordinarily revealing," continued the DA. "Pamela Sanders collapsed completely during the first interrogation session. She has provided exhaustive details about every phase of the conspiracy, from initial planning to final execution. According to the DA, Pamela had confessed that the original idea of the homicide had arisen 6 months ago when they discovered the real value of my business empire during a casual conversation with the company accountant. The figure of $847 million had awakened a greed that gradually transformed into murderous obsession. Mrs. Sanders described in detail how they investigated poisoning methods for weeks, consulting medical sources on the internet and eventually contacting the corrupt pharmacist Andrew Ross, who provided them with specific advice on undetectable lethal combinations, continued the DA. But the most chilling part was the confession about my grandson Arthur. Pamela had revealed that they had noticed the child's curiosity about their nightly conversations and had developed a secondary plan to remove him permanently from the country if he became a problematic witness. They planned to take the minor to the Bahamas under the pretext of protecting him from family trauma after your death, explained the DA. Once established in territory without extradition, they would have cut completely any contact of the child with U.S. authorities or relatives who could question the circumstances of his inheritance. The betrayal toward Arthur represented an additional dimension of cruelty that was incomprehensible to me. They had not only planned to kill me, they had decided to rob my grandson of his identity, his homeland, and any possibility of knowing the truth about his grandfather's destiny. "What has Robert declared during his interrogations?" I asked, needing to understand how my own son had mentally justified the decision to become a patricide. The DA sighed deeply before answering. "Your son has adopted a different legal strategy. Initially, he denied all direct participation, claiming that the actions were the exclusive initiative of his wife. However, when we presented him with physical evidence of his purchases of toxic substances and documents with his handwriting detailing the homicide schedule, his version crumbled completely. Robert had finally confessed that the primary motivation was impatience. He stated textually that he had been waiting for years for you to take decisions about business succession, but your vitality and longevity were frustrating. Reasonable expectations of inheritance, the DA informed me, with evident professional disgust. The coldness of that statement cut my breath. My son had measured the value of my life against his financial convenience, and had decided that my premature death was more beneficial than my natural survival. But there were more disturbing revelations. During additional searches at his home, investigators had discovered personal diaries where Robert meticulously documented his family resentments accumulated for decades. The diaries reveal that your son harbored deep grudges related to business decisions you had taken without consulting him, investments he considered erroneous, and what he perceived as lack of recognition for his contributions to the family business. Explained the DA. These resentments had fermented for years until transforming into psychological justifications for homicide. Robert had convinced himself that I was an obstacle to the true potential of the family business, and that my elimination would represent both personal and economic liberation. Most disturbing, continued the DA, is that both confessed to having considered alternative homicide methods during their planning. They evaluated everything from car accidents to food poisoning, finally selecting poisoning for being the most controllable and least suspicious method. The investigation had also exposed the institutional corruption they had managed to infiltrate. Lawyer Frank Vaughn had confessed his participation in exchange for sentence reduction, revealing a network of corrupt professionals specialized in facilitating fraudulent asset transfers after suspicious deaths. Mr. Miller, based on full confessions and irrefutable physical evidence, I can confirm that Robert Miller and Pamela Sanders will face charges for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances of premeditation and economic motivation. The probable sentences range between 25 and 30 years in prison. When I hung up the phone after that devastating conversation, I remained sitting in my study for hours, processing the full magnitude of the family betrayal that had almost cost me my life. My son, the person I had raised, educated, and prepared to continue my legacy, had meticulously planned my murder with the same dedication I had applied to build our family empire. The irony was cruel and incomprehensible. They had been willing to destroy everything I represented to appropriate everything I had created. But thanks to the protective innocence of an 8-year-old boy, justice had prevailed. Over greed and truth had triumphed over the most intimate betrayal imaginable. On Tuesday, March 18th, exactly 2 weeks after the night that almost cost me my life, I made the most momentous decisions of my 67 years of existence. Robert and Pamela's betrayal had irreversibly destroyed the emotional foundations of what I considered my family, but it had also freed me to rebuild my legacy on bases of absolute authenticity. My first action was to call an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors of Miller Grocery in the main boardroom of our corporate offices. The 7 members of the board, composed of minority partners and trusted executives who had collaborated with me for decades, met with expressions of shock and concern, reflecting the media impact of the family scandal. Esteemed colleagues, I began with a firm voice but loaded with contained emotion. Recent events have demonstrated that family trust can be the most dangerous illusion in the business world. Therefore, I have decided to implement structural changes that guarantee the continuity and integrity of our company, regardless of future family circumstances. During the next 3 hours, I presented to the board a corporate restructuring plan that completely eliminated any influence of Robert on business operation. His position as regional manager was revoked immediately. His minority shares were repurchased by the company at market value, and his access to corporate facilities was permanently banned. Robert Miller is removed from all positions, responsibilities, and benefits associated with Miller Grocery. I declared officially before the board. Furthermore, it is established that no member of his immediate family branch may occupy executive positions in the company under any future circumstance. But the most significant restructuring concerned the patrimonial future of the company. I had decided to transform Miller Grocery from a traditional family business into a corporation with social purpose, where profits would benefit both employees and charitable causes, with Arthur as the only legitimate heir when he reached legal age. Effective immediately, 70% of the annual profits of the company will be allocated to an employee benefit fund, including educational scholarships for their children, subsidized housing programs, and expanded family health insurance. I announced, observing the expressions of gratifying surprise on the faces of my collaborators. The remaining 30% of profits would be accumulated in the irrevocable trust established for Arthur, guaranteeing that he inherited not only material wealth, but also a company built on unshakable ethical values. My next move was more personal and painful, the complete restructuring of my personal will. In my private office, I worked alongside Nicholas Parker for 6 hours, drafting a document that reflected the new reality of my family situation. Joseph, this will is the most exhaustive I have drafted in 30 years of legal practice. Nicholas informed me while we reviewed the final clauses. It effectively eliminates any possibility of Robert or Pamela claiming inheritance, regardless of future legal circumstances. The document specifically established that due to documented criminal actions against my person, including conspiracy for homicide with patrimonial motivation, Robert Miller remains completely disinherited, without right to claim assets, properties, or benefits derived from our family relationship. But the most important clause concerned Arthur. The will designated him as sole universal heir, but with extraordinary protections that would prevent any future manipulation by his parents or corrupt legal representatives. The minor Arthur Miller Sanders will inherit the totality of my personal assets, valued at $900 million, but under fiduciary administration until turning 25 years of age, stated the document. The designated administrators will have absolute authority to guarantee his education, well-being, and moral development without interference from his biological parents. Simultaneously, I initiated legal proceedings to obtain permanent custody of Arthur. Social services had exhaustively evaluated my financial, emotional, and family situation, concluding that I represented the most stable and beneficial custody option for the minor. The social worker Hope Morales, in charge of Arthur's case, visited me to discuss transition arrangements. Mr. Miller the minor has repeatedly expressed his desire to live with you. He understands, within his childish possibilities, that his parents have committed serious actions that have separated them from him permanently. The most emotional meeting occurred the following Friday, when I could finally see Arthur after 2 weeks of forced separation. I found him in a temporary shelter where he had been under specialized psychological care to process the trauma of the family situation. When I entered the visiting room, Arthur ran toward me with tears in his big, expressive eyes. His hug was so strong that I felt as if he was clinging to the only emotional stability he had left in the world. "Grandpa, is it true that Mom and Dad wanted to hurt you?" he asked me, with the brutal honesty that only children can express. "Yes, Arthur, but thanks to your bravery in telling me what you had heard, we managed to prevent anything bad from happening," I explained, gently caressing his hair, while searching for appropriate words to explain such a complex betrayal. "Will I be able to live with you forever?" was his next question, loaded with vulnerability and hope. "Forever, son. We will be a new family built on honesty and true love." That afternoon, when custody papers were finally approved and Arthur officially moved into my mansion, I understood that I had lost a son corrupted by greed, but I had gained the opportunity to raise a grandson under principles that would guarantee he never repeated the moral errors of his parents. Family justice had been served, my assets protected, and my legacy secured in innocent hands that would honor it appropriately. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace with the future we had built together. 4 years have passed since that March night that changed the course of our lives forever. While I write these lines in my study, I watch through the window as Arthur, now 12 years old, plays soccer in the garden with his friends from St. Patrick's Private School, where he attends 7th grade with outstanding grades and a personality that radiates the confidence of a child loved unconditionally. Robert and Pamela's trial concluded in September 2024 with sentences that reflected the gravity of their crimes. Robert was sentenced to 28 years in prison for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, while Pamela received 26 years on the same charges, with a minor reduction due to her complete collaboration with authorities during the investigation. On the day of sentencing, Judge Frank Henderson pronounced words that will remain engraved in my memory forever. This court has witnessed one of the most chilling cases of family betrayal motivated by excessive greed. The defendants not only planned the murder of the one who had provided them life and sustenance, but were willing to sacrifice the psychological well-being of their own child to consummate their criminal ambitions. I never saw Robert in person again. I rejected all his requests for prison visits, and the letters he tried to send me during the first year were returned unopened. Some might consider this attitude cruel or ruthless, but I understand it as the only appropriate response to a betrayal that transcended all limits of what is humanly acceptable. Pamela, on the contrary, managed to contact me on one occasion through her defense lawyer, requesting a meeting to explain her motivations and ask forgiveness for the mistakes committed. My answer was clear and irrevocable. Some actions transcend the possibility of forgiveness. Premeditated attempted murder definitely belongs to that category. The transformation of Miller Grocery during these 4 years has exceeded all my expectations. The company has grown from 47 stores to 63 establishments distributed throughout the region with a current valuation exceeding $1.2 billion. But the most satisfying thing has been implementing the model of conscious capitalism I designed after the family tragedy. Our employees now enjoy benefits that include subsidized housing for 500 families, full university scholarships for all children of workers with outstanding academic performance, and healthcare programs that cover specialized treatments traditionally inaccessible for middle-class families. Mary Carmen Lopez, my partner of decades now, occupies the position of executive president, directing daily operations, while I concentrate on strategic planning and, more importantly, on raising Arthur with values that will guarantee he never repeats the moral errors of his parents. Arthur's emotional development has been extraordinary, considering the traumatic circumstances of his early childhood. Child psychologist Dr. Amy Vidal, who has worked with him during these 4 years, informed me recently that the minor has completely processed the family trauma and has developed a mature understanding of the importance of moral integrity in human relationships. Arthur knows the complete truth about his parents, explained gradually and in a manner appropriate for his cognitive development. He understands that his parents committed terrible acts, motivated by greed, and that the consequences of their decisions were just and necessary. But most importantly, he has learned to distinguish between the actions of people and his own inherent value as a human being. "Grandpa," he said to me a few weeks ago while we walked through the park near our house, "do you think I could become like them when I grow up?" His question moved me deeply because it revealed the mature reflection of a child who understands the gravity of family legacies. "Arthur," I replied, "the decisions we make every day determine who we are. Your parents chose greed over love, betrayal over loyalty. You have already demonstrated choosing honesty, kindness, and concern for others. Those choices define you much more than any blood relationship." The trust established for Arthur has grown exponentially during these years. When he turns 25 in 2037, he will inherit an estate valued at approximately $2 billion. including the company completely sanitized and modernized diversified real estate properties and investments in emerging technology sectors, which will guarantee his economic relevance for future decades. But more important than material wealth is the integral education he is receiving. Arthur studies 3 foreign languages, practices piano and violin, participates in chess competitions at the national level, and develops leadership skills through volunteer programs in charitable organizations that support vulnerable families. I want to use the money to help kids who have gone through difficult situations like me, he told me recently, demonstrating an empathy and social consciousness that fills me with pride and hope about the future of our family legacy. This morning, while I reviewed the quarterly financial statements of the company and planned the next commercial expansions, I reflected on the poetic irony of how events had unfolded. Robert and Pamela had been willing to murder me to appropriate $800 million, but their criminal actions had resulted in the complete loss of any economic benefit and the creation of an estate that now exceeds $2 billion, destined entirely to the grandson they had been willing to manipulate and remove from his homeland. Justice, in the end, had demonstrated having a sense of balance more sophisticated than any human revenge could have designed. Now, while I watch Arthur laughing with his friends in the garden, I understand that I have gained something infinitely more valuable than simple survival: the opportunity to train an heir who will truly honor everything we have built, not by blood obligation, but by authentic moral conviction. The Miller Empire will continue to prosper for generations, but now on foundations of unshakable integrity. If you like this story, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.